Right, so continuing the theme with overwintering, we're going to look at the bananas today, and I'll have to apologise, the light is terrible. It's quite early in the morning, so the sun's low in the sky and it's casting some nasty shadows. So what we've got here, we'll go through a few different types of bananas and how I overwinter them, which is probably the same as most people, and my thoughts on each banana and just how to sort of get them through winter really. So Musabashi really easy, depending on where you are in the country. You don't need to do anything up to more northern areas maybe wrap them. I mean this is a common procedure, and for a lot of people there's nothing new there. You can either use straw, build a cage around it, straw or fleece. Bit controversial. In the past I've always used bubble wrap, and people say, oh, they get too damp, that'll rot them off. Well, I've never had that problem myself. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I've never had that problem. I've done it several years on the trot. Just a couple of layers of bubble wrap round and just a bag over the top, which you can sort of take off on the a bag or a cloche, just something to keep the wet going in the top where you cut the leaves off. Just something to stop the rain getting in, keeping it a little bit drier. I've never had any problem with the pseudo stem rotting out, being wrapped up in plastic or bubble wrap. But I mean, that's just what I do. But saying that I don't really do that anymore. I just leave them to their own devices. This clump here was this one banana last year which died down to the ground, and from that we've got about 5 or 6, biggest being probably 6 foot with, I don't know, 3.5, 4 foot pseudo stem. So lazy people, not say lazy people, but if you don't want to do anything, you can just do nothing, leave them to it, or fleece it, whatever. But going to the next extreme, so we've got some Cicanensis here which aren't quite as hardy as Musabashi, so I will be wrapping these. So we've got a standard Cicanensis there, and we've got a Bengal tiger at the back there, which is a bit bigger. So these two I want to keep the stems on them. Not too worried about Musabashi if they die down to the ground, but I do want to keep the Cicanensis, the height on these. So I will be just wrapping the trunks with bubble wrap. And when I say that, when it comes to the first frost, light frost, I'll cut the leaves off, bubble wrap it to sort of the crown where the leaves are growing out from, and then I will put just a couple of layers of bubble wrap around it and a cloche or a plastic bag on top, just to keep the rain from going in. And like I say, on the dry or mild day, you just whip the bag off, no problem, and that will just help it dry out around the pseudo stem. Again, you can use fleece, which is going to be a similar situation. So they're pretty straightforward to look after them. We have got a different type of banana now. So we're looking at the golden lotus banana, or Musella lessicarpa. So this one last year was dug up and potted and just kept in the greenhouse. Survived, but I find a better hit rate, if you like, or better survival rate, is to leave them in the ground, because I have lost in the past digging them up, unless you're gonna sort of heat them to a sort of extent. They don't really respond well to be dug up and potted up and left over winter. I find a better survival rate to leave them in the ground. And this is an example. So this one last year was left in the ground, and again, people will probably frown upon it, but I fleeced it. I left a couple of leaves on there, a couple of centre leaves, put a couple of layers of fleece round, and then put a plastic bag over it, and just pegged the plastic bag into the ground, and that stayed like that all winter. And bearing in mind that was the worst winter we've had in a few years. And yes, the 2 leaves I left on it died off, but as soon as it warmed up, that started growing again. So I'm not concerned about, you know, being kept in a plastic bag over it, you know, keeping it damp and rotting it out, because as long as you've got a fleece layer between them, I find that sort of doesn't cause too much of a problem. So I'll be doing the same again next year. So literally cut most of the leaves off, just leave 1 or 2 in the centre, because they do, if we get a mild winter, they'll keep the leaves, and that'll give you a head start for next year. And a couple of layers of fleece around the pseudostem and around the leaves. And then I put a couple of stakes in. When I say stakes, you can use just bamboo poles, whatever, and then put a plastic bag over it, so the plastic bag is not touching the plant. You've got air in between the plastic bag and the fleece layer, and yeah, that'll cause no problems. And that'll be the benefit from that as well. You do get a bit of a greenhouse effect, so it keeps it a little bit warmer when the sun's out, especially in the spring. That'll warm it up and get it going a bit quicker than if you just sort of fleeced it. Right, so that sort of leads us on to the insets, which I know in some rare situations people leave them in the ground, they come back, but in general that is certainly not a good idea. You're going to get some rot on it, even if it survives and grows back. I don't think you're going to get as good a plant as you could have done if you protected it properly or brought it in. So we've got 2 Enset Morellii, the red bananas, and we've got a Enset Heniba. They're big enough to dry store, but I don't tend to do that. I did the first few years, I dry stored them, had no problem, as long as you keep them sort of 4 or 5 degrees, as long as they're dried out. Cut the leaves off, obviously cut the roots off, all dried out, no problem. But what I tend to do now is just dig them out, take most of the roots off. I mean, as you dig them out, the roots, swarm of seagulls coming over. With all the digging up process, you break a lot of roots anyway, so I do leave a few roots on, cut off most of the leaves, just leave 1 or 2, and pot them up into compost. So this is what I've done. I've got a good example of one that I've already done. So you don't want a huge pot. This compost is a little bit damp still, so I'm gonna have it in the greenhouse to let it dry out. So you can see exactly what we've done. We've cut all the leaves off just at the base, so we've got the pseudostem basically intact. I mean, these are mainly leaf bases anyway. The main portion is down here, but we'll leave all them intact. And I've just left 1 main leaf, and obviously you've got a little roller coming up there as well. So the idea is, obviously we've removed a lot of the roots. I've just put it in a pot just big enough to fit it in, and we'll let that dry out fully, and I'll be keeping that just frost free. And as long as it's dry, that shouldn't rot out. And this is what I've done the last couple of years. And yeah, you keep that in your whatever area. I mean, I suppose you could bring it inside. It's a bit of an ugly sight inside, and they will continue to grow inside and look a bit rough with the leaves looking very poor, and they are a bit of a pest magnet indoors as well. You'll have possibly a lot of insect problems, but you know, some people do grow them over winter indoors, but for me, I'll be just keeping it frost free, either probably in my hothouse, and that's a bit of a misleading name. I call it a hothouse, obviously in the winter it's not hot, but it is going to be frost free, so that's where all these insects will go in this situation. So again, I just need to, when I dug this out, I turned it upside down because you get loads and loads of water trapped in all these leaf bases, so you need to drain all that out. Ideally dry compost. This was still a bit damp, so like I say, I'm going to give it the next week or two to dry out fully in the greenhouse, and that will, so it's got a little bit of root to start next year, and it doesn't matter if, to an extent, if the roots rot off a little bit, because they do tend to rot off quicker than the base itself. So as long as the base doesn't rot, that's the main thing. So really, ideally, really dry soil, and keep it as dry as you can over winter. And then as soon as that starts getting a little bit of warmth, you can just put a little dribble of water in it, and hopefully as it starts to grow, you can gradually increase the water until you're getting good temperatures. But I mean, that's a real rough guide, but let's look at some of the bananas we're growing and what I do to protect them. So in conclusion, some you're going to need to dig out, insects. What I haven't covered actually is the Tropicana. So I did have a couple in here which I said I was going to leave to die, and I did have a concerned viewer saying that is a little bit wasteful, which it is, and we're going to give them a chance. So I did dig them out, and I've potted them up, and they're actually in a hothouse. So I've sort of done it similar as the end set here, where I've cut a few of the old leaves off, probably broke a few roots digging them up, but I've put them in quite a small pot, and I will be bringing them in because they're sort of dwarf bananas. They're not too invasive in the house, so that they will go in for that. Right, so that's sort of covered all the bases. So anything sort of tropical or very tender, you'll need to protect. But some of the, like I say, with the lotus banana, they're quite tough actually. They're almost as hardy as the Musa Baju, and they will surprise you. Right, so I don't think I can add much more to that, so we'll leave it there, and thanks for watching.